Hey everybody, it's Jeff. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the trickier things of gardening, especially when you're growing seeds, starting them inside and then having to move them out. It's a little thing called hardening off. Before we get into all the details of what you need to do, how long to take them out for, whether you put them in the shade or the sun, all these questions that we constantly get, I've got a little quiz for you guys. If I'm quiet for a second, you're going to be able to hear a noise. Let's hear. If any of you can guess what that is, drop that in the comments. We're going to talk about that later, along with everything else you need to know, so let's get into it. Okay, so what I have here is a partial tray of tomatoes, and I am waiting on some peppers to pop up. It's warm to the touch because I've had it on a heat mat. And what I want to start with is timing. A lot of the questions we get is how long do you need to harden off for, and how old does the plant need to be? I will say this, I would not measure it from the age of the plant, but rather you're going to want to backdate from the date that you want to plant them out and subtract 2 weeks from that. So if you know that your garden space is going to be ready, let's say April 1st, we're going to want to start hardening off around March 15th to give us 2 weeks to get these guys strong enough to withstand the harsh sun and the wind. Okay, speaking of wind, I know it didn't take me long to get to this part, the answer to the question I asked just a few seconds ago. But did any of you guess what that was, that noise that was humming? Let me just show you guys what it was. Da, 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 da. Now there's no way for me to know at this point if anybody got it right, but as you saw, it's a fan. So that is one thing that you can do to help your hardening off process, is to put a little fan on your plants, whether it's inside or a greenhouse. If you're starting these outside to begin with, you don't need the fan because you have the wind. Now why is wind important? That's something we're going to talk about when we get outside. Okay, so here we are outside next to a few trays of tomatoes, peppers, and some basil that have already been hardened off. These guys have been living outside day and night for about a week. Before I go any further, I do want to clarify that this video is for zone 9 and 10 and warm season crops only. When you're hardening off cool season crops, you're thinking about it completely different. The tables are completely turned in terms of temperature and time of day and all the things that we're going to talk about. So if you're watching this in the fall, this will not help you. But if you're watching this in spring, March, April-ish, then you're in the right place. So the very first day that you start to harden off your plants, you're going to take them from inside to outside in the hottest part of the day, but put them in the shade. Don't expose them to direct sunlight because they will just fry, especially if they're small. Now if they're a little bigger, they may survive, but they're going to get something called sunburn. I don't know if it's really called sunburn. That's what I call it because you're getting burned by the sun. So this plant right here, one of two things happened. Either I didn't harden it off very well and it got burnt by the sun or the wind, or when it was a baby, I let it get too close to the lights inside, and effectively the same thing happened. It got too hot and it burned the leaf. So as you can see, the plant didn't die. Your plants can withstand a little bit of sunburn or windburn, but it's not the goal. It's really going to slow them down, and they're not going to grow as quickly, and it's going to be more difficult for them to get to maturity. But again, it's not going to kill them. So day one, outside in the warmest part of the day in the shade, you're going to go from that to the 2 week mark where you're leaving them outside all day, and then also leaving them outside at night. Now, what that looks like between day 1 and day 14 is completely up to you. It's not as if I have a 14-day schedule where day 1 is 2 hours and then day 2 is 3 hours. Like a lot of us, I have a full-time job, I have a family, I have other things to do, so I'm just doing my best to get them out in the elements, the wind and the sun, without killing them. So whatever that looks like for you, it's probably going to be fine. Just remember, don't take your plants directly from inside and put them straight into the ground. You are going to need up to 2 weeks to harden them off. Now, I know what I just said a lot of you are not going to like. So let me try to give you just an example timeline of what hardening off could look like for you. Like I said, first day, 2 hours, warmest part of the day in the shade. For that first week or 5 days, I wouldn't put them in direct sunlight at all. I would just increase the amount of hours while they're in the shade. Once you feel like, and I say feel like, it's all about intuition and learning, and you're gonna kill some plants maybe, you're gonna burn some plants, but take note of what happened. Did I leave them in the sun? Did the sun shift while I was at work and I thought they were in the shade and they weren't? Always keep notes as a gardener, because you're going to learn season after season of how to harden off that works for you that I could never tell you. But rule of thumb is keep them out of the sun first 5 days. You're really just trying to get them used to the temperature and get some wind on them. Then after that 5 days, go ahead and take them into the direct sun. At that point, you will have had them in the shade for maybe 4 to 6 hours during the day. I would reduce that down to maybe 1 to 2 hours for another 5 days to a week until you get to the point where they've been out in the sun for 6 to 8 hours and they're completely fine. At that point, I would consider them fully hardened off. So here are a couple things to keep in mind when you're hardening off. You've got the schedule. How do you treat the plants? One thing you're definitely not going to want to do is put dry soil with a plant in it outside for the very first time. I highly recommend making sure that your plants are watered. We've said this before, but I'll reiterate it here. You always want to water in the morning. You never want to water at night. Plants and water at night, when they're in their sleeping cycle, I'll call it, don't mix very well. They can much better process that water during the day when they're awake. So make sure that they're watered, because that's going to give them enough moisture to survive in the elevated temperatures, the direct sunlight, and the wind. Now, as you continue to harden off, I've talked about wind a lot. I mentioned the fan inside to kind of help the process, but why is wind important? There was actually a very famous study done where they created a biodome that they were trying to grow trees in, and the trees would grow up and then they would completely fall over, and they couldn't figure out why. Finally, they realized it was the wind. What the wind does is going to strengthen this stem and give it the ability to stand up as the wind gets greater and greater, as the plant gets bigger and bigger. If you take a plant from inside where it experiences no wind and put it outside, as soon as that wind hits, not only are the leaves going to start to brown, it's not going to have the strength to stand up. So not only are you getting it ready for temperatures and light, but that wind is important too. I mentioned I was going to talk about frost. We are lucky enough in 10B that we don't worry about frost here, but for those of you who are in 9, 8, definitely 7 and below, you guys know what frost dates are, or I hope you do. If you don't, look them up. But one reason that we do harden off during the day and we don't leave them out overnight is those extra cold temperatures at night are not going to do very well for the plant. If it comes to a hard frost, it's going to kill them. So if you are in an area that does get a frost, I'll reiterate again, don't leave your plants out overnight until after that frost date. Okay, so here I am at a bed where I'm going to plant some Genovese and sweet basil. Like I said, these have been hardened off, but if you notice behind me, I've still got 2 cabbages in the ground. That's why I mentioned the 2 weeks should be when the bed is going to be ready. These are ready to harvest, so these are ready to plant. Now here are some tips after you've hardened off to help you get success to get these in the ground safely and happily. First, when you're planting out, don't plant them out in the morning, don't plant them out at noon. Even early afternoon is not a great idea. As soon as that sun starts to go down and that you can feel the temperatures getting cooler, that is a perfect time to plant them out. Again, like when hardening off, we're going to want to make sure that what you're planting them into is moist. I can feel this soil here is moist because it's on drip all year round. If I give it a squeeze, I've got good compaction there, it stays together. I've got some mulch mixed in there. But once I do all my amending and add my compost and my granular fertilizer, I'm going to want to make sure that this is completely moist, because if I put this plant into the ground, into dry soil, it's going to do the opposite of what we want. And that's going to take all the soil that's in this little pot, it's going to spread out across the rest of the bed away from the roots, where what you want to do is create a big sponge around the new plant and really water that in so that water can go from your soil to the roots and not the other way around. Okay, so let me get this guy in the ground real quick, and maybe temporarily, because like I said, I have not amended yet, and the skunk or possum that we have living in one of our trees, well, the possum lives in a tree. I don't know where the skunk lives. I think it goes back down to hell. It has been doing a number on our bed, so I may have to fix this later, but I want to show you guys one last tip when you are planting out that's going to help give your plant success. Now here's something for free. If this plant spacing allows for it, I always try to find one of my emitters and plant right on one of the emitters so that it's definitely going to get some water. Most plants will root out from their stem, but a lot take a really long time, and you may end up rotting the stem if you plant it too deep. So I'm going to plant this right at the soil level. Let's check out these roots. This is always fun. Yeah, we're almost getting root bound, but it still looks healthy. I'm going to just disturb these just a little bit. If you do buy something from a big box store, it's almost guaranteed to be root bound. So you do want to break these up a little bit so that they can go out and venture and get all the nutrients from the whole bed and not get used to just growing in a circle like this. So break those up. This will do something called transplant shock, which is just part of growing. It's going to grow slowly for the first couple weeks because it's in shock, but it's going to bounce back and you'll be just fine. So I'm putting this right at the soil level, getting that down in there. Then I'm going to bring the mulch back. I don't have my hose down here, but I'm definitely going to want to water in. The soil right here on the emitter is wet, like I mentioned earlier. If everything else is dry, it's going to pull that moisture away. So you're going to not just water at the base, but give yourself a radius of really moist soil. Again, do it, wait, do it some more, wait, water some more, etc. But here's the last tip that's going to get this little baby plant that started inside happy and healthy outside, and that is shade cloth. If you guys don't have shade cloth, go out and get some. This is one of those things that takes you from an intermediate gardener to a professional gardener. If you can find white shade cloth, it's even better because it's cooler. Black absorbs light and heat, white reflects light and heat, and so at this time you don't want a lot of heat because they're used to being inside a nice 72 degrees. In a couple weeks when it turns 80, 85, that's a no-go. So get hoops or something to keep it off the plant so it doesn't smother the plant. Leave that on for about a week, take it off, you're gonna be golden. Before I end this video, I just want to remind you guys to like and subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel and the best way for you guys to keep up to date anytime we put out new content so you can become better gardeners. Okay, so let's recap hardening off. When you're starting inside, you can't take them from inside directly outside. You're going to need a 2-week period, starting them about 2 hours in the shade, working your way up to 6 to 8 hours in the sun. At that point, you can leave them out overnight, as long as your area is well past that last frost date. Zone 10, we don't have it. 8 and 9, you might, so check that out. Always keep them watered. When you transplant, make sure not only the immediate area, but the surrounding area is watered. Do it at night to give that one night of cool temperatures before the sun comes out the next day. Even look at the forecast. This is new, I didn't mention this earlier, but if you have a heat stretch of like 3 or 4 days where it's going to be really hot, don't plant something out at the beginning. Wait till that passes if you can. And finally, the key to all this is shade cloth. If you can get your hands on some shade cloth, cover those plants for about a week, let them get really acclimated before you take them off. Once you take it off, it's going to have full sun, the temperatures are getting warmer, and they're going to take off. If you guys at home have been hardening off for a while, we want to hear from you. What are some tricks? How do you do it? What is your timetable? Drop that in the comments and let's learn together. Okay, what are you saying, Sam?